a faraway future, humanity has made its mark among the stars, living in cities that blend technology with nature, where towering buildings stretch into the sky and hovercrafts fill the air. But in the bustling heart of this world, there was a man who had nothing but his will to survive. His name was Alex, a man who had no legs, confined to a wheelchair for as long as he could remember. People often stared at him with pity or sometimes with curiosity, but he never let their looks define him. He moved through the world with a quiet resolve, his eyes always looking forward, never down. To him, the world was just a place he had to conquer, one day at a time. His life wasn't easy, but it was his own, and he never allowed anyone to pity him. One day, while walking through the crowded streets of the city, Alex found himself near the marketplace. The smells of street food filled the air, and merchants called out to passers-by. It was just another day, or so he thought. But today was different. Today, his life would change forever. As he navigated through the crowd, he noticed something unusual. At the far end of the square stood a woman who seemed entirely out of place. She stood tall, her ethereal presence making the bustling crowd seem insignificant. Dressed in a flowing gown that shimmered in the sunlight, her platinum blonde hair cascaded down her back in waves, glowing faintly as if she were from another world. But it was her eyes that caught Alex's attention, eyes that glowed with an otherworldly light, shimmering like a pair of precious gems. She stood still, observing the crowd with an air of quiet authority. There was something regal about her, something that set her apart from everyone else. People seemed to notice her, but no one dared approach. They simply walked past, stealing glances at the mysterious woman who stood there like a statue, untouched by the world around her. Alex didn't know why, but he felt compelled to approach her. Something inside him told him that she wasn't like the others, that there was a story waiting to be discovered behind those glowing eyes. He rolled his wheelchair toward her, his heart pounding in his chest. As he drew closer, he found himself speechless. It wasn't just her beauty that captivated him. It was the aura of power and vulnerability she carried with her, something he could relate to in ways he didn't yet understand. When he was just a few feet away, she turned her head and locked eyes with him. There was a moment of silence, a brief pause that felt like an eternity. Her eyes studied him, and for a brief moment he felt as if she could see right through him, into the very soul of who he was. "Are you all right?" Alex asked, his voice surprisingly steady despite the sudden rush of emotions flooding his mind. The woman didn't respond immediately. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, as though trying to understand something that had just been revealed to her. There was a softness in her gaze, yet there was also something else, a sadness, an uncertainty, as if she were searching for something she couldn't find. "I'm not sure," she said finally, her voice soft yet firm. "I have traveled far from my home, and I don't know what I am searching for, but I feel as if I have found something important here." Her words, though simple, felt like they held so much weight. There was a sense of urgency in them, as though her very existence was bound to this moment. Alex looked at her, feeling an unspoken connection, something that pulled him toward her in a way he couldn't explain. "I think I know what you mean," Alex replied, his voice quieter now. "Sometimes we have to look beyond what we think we need to find what we're really searching for." The woman's eyes widened for a brief second, as though his words had pierced through the veil of her uncertainty. She took a step closer, her gaze never leaving his. It was as if in that one moment they understood each other perfectly. "You are not like the others," she said softly, almost as though to herself. "You see beyond appearances." Alex couldn't help but feel a strange warmth wash over him. Here he was, a man with no legs, no real power in the physical sense. And yet this extraordinary being, a princess, from the way she carried herself, saw something in him that no one else had ever seen. She saw past his disability, past his wheelchair, and into his heart. For a brief moment there was no need for words. The air between them was thick with unspoken understanding. And just as Alex thought he had come to the end of this strange encounter, The woman's eyes flared with emotion, and she whispered something under her breath. "Why does it feel like you are the one I've been waiting for?" At that moment, Alex was struck by an overwhelming sense of confusion and wonder. He had heard of fate, of destiny, but he had never believed in it until now. The princess's words echoed in his mind, and the questions piled up. Why him? Why now? And why did his heart race so violently at the sound of her voice? Before he could respond, a sudden sharp cry rang out. The princess gasped, and Alex turned to see the source of the noise. There, in the distance, a shadow moved quickly, toward them. It was too late to turn back now. The moment had arrived, and the princess was no longer the distant, untouchable being she had once been. For the first time, Alex realized that he wasn't just an observer. He was part of something much larger than himself, and as the princess screamed his name, the story that would change both their lives was only just beginning. As the princess and Alex stood in the middle of the bustling city square, the weight of their unspoken connection hung heavily in the air. The world around them continued, oblivious to the profound moment unfolding between two seemingly opposite beings. But for the princess, whose name was Lyra, the encounter with Alex marked the beginning of something that would challenge everything she had known. Lyra, a princess from the distant and powerful planet of Xeris, had never experienced such vulnerability. Her life had been a series of battles, political alliances, and expectations. From a young age, she was taught that power was the ultimate form of survival. Strength and control were the pillars of her existence. She was trained to rule, to lead, to conquer. The people of Xeris adored her, but they also feared her. She was a symbol of power, a beacon of authority. She had never been allowed to show weakness, never given the luxury of doubt or fear. The weight of her responsibilities was immense, and the pressure to remain flawless in the eyes of her people was suffocating. But now, in the presence of Alex, she felt something she couldn't understand, something raw and unfiltered. Alex, who had no legs and was confined to a wheelchair, showed her a strength she had never witnessed before. His unwavering resolve, his courage, and the quiet power in his eyes made her question everything she had been taught. How could a man, who appeared so physically weak, possess such profound strength? How could someone like him make her feel something so profound? Something that was far beyond her comprehension. As they stood in the square, the air seemed to shift. It wasn't just the bustling city around them anymore. It was something much larger. Something about Alex made Lyra feel small. Not in the way her enemies made her feel, but in a humbling, human way. She had lived her life surrounded by people who sought her power, who desired to be in her presence for her status. But Alex didn't seek her approval. He didn't even seem to care about her status. He only cared about what lay beneath her title, her heart, her soul. But it wasn't just Alex that was making Lyra question everything. The reality of her responsibilities as a princess was becoming harder to ignore. A threat was growing on the horizon, a rebellion led by a faction of her own people who believed that the monarchy had outlived its usefulness. They demanded freedom, and they were prepared to do whatever it took to bring down the royal family. Lyra had received intelligence that this rebellion was planning an attack on the royal palace, and it was only a matter of time before it would reach her. The pressure mounted as she realized that the very thing she had worked her entire life for was at risk of crumbling. She had been groomed for this moment, trained to handle the uprising with strength, precision, and authority. But something in her heart told her that this wasn't the path she wanted to take anymore. She had been so focused on holding on to power, on maintaining control, that she had forgotten what it meant to truly live, to feel, to connect. Alex had reminded her of something vital, that she had lost long ago. The moment she had shared with Alex wasn't just a fleeting connection. It had unlocked something inside her, a door she had long closed. The walls she had built around herself, the armor she had worn for so long, began to crack. She felt the weight of her royal title bearing down on her, suffocating her. The rebellion was coming, yes, but so was her personal reckoning. The very thing she had avoided, her emotions, her desires, her humanity, was now pulling at her, demanding attention. Alex had no such walls. He didn't have the luxury of a title or the power of an entire kingdom to protect him. He was a man with nothing to hide, and yet, he had the kind of strength she had always admired from afar but never understood until now. His courage wasn't just physical, it was emotional, spiritual. It came from a place deep within him, a place she hadn't tapped into in years. She didn't know why she was drawn to him so strongly. Maybe it was his unyielding determination, or perhaps it was the way he saw her, not as a princess but as a person. As she stood there with him, the city square growing quieter with every passing second, Lyra felt a sense of inner conflict tearing at her. She had always believed that strength came from power, from control, from dominance. But now, faced with Alex, she wasn't so sure. He had no power in the traditional sense, yet he radiated a force that she couldn't ignore. He had no need to command respect. It was given to him because of who he was at his core. "I have to go back," Lyra said softly, breaking the silence that had settled between them. "There's something I must do." Alex looked at her, concern flickering across his face. "What is it?" he asked, his voice steady, calm. "There is a rebellion," she explained, her voice faltering slightly. "A faction of my own people. They believe the monarchy is no longer fit to rule. I have to go back and prepare for what's coming." For a moment, Alex said nothing. He simply stared at her, his eyes filled with understanding. He knew what it meant to fight, to struggle against something larger than yourself. But he also knew the value of fighting for what mattered, what was truly worth saving. "I'll come with you," he said, his voice unwavering. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected that. "What can you do? I'm not strong physically, but I can help," Alex replied. "You don't have to do this alone." For the first time, Lyra felt her resolve begin to soften. She had spent so long alone in her role, carrying the weight of a kingdom on her shoulders. But now, with Alex by her side, she didn't feel so alone. He wasn't a warrior, but he was a fighter. And in that moment, she realized that maybe, just maybe, the power she had been chasing all these years wasn't the power she needed. Together, they would face what was to come, and as they set off toward her palace, Lyra knew that this journey would not only change the fate of her kingdom, but also change her life and her heart forever. The air around them was thick with tension. Lyra and Alex traveled in silence, for hours, the weight of their decisions hanging heavy between them. The rebellion that threatened Lyra's kingdom was no longer a distant threat. It was a reality, one that was drawing closer with every passing day. The palace, once a symbol of her unchallenged rule, now felt like a prison. Lyra's thoughts were a whirlwind. She had always been taught to be strong, to be unshakable in the face of adversity. But the more she thought about Alex, the more she realized that the strength she had known her entire life was not the same as the strength he carried within him. He was different. He didn't rely on power, status, or the strength of his limbs. Instead, his strength came from something deeper, something that made him unafraid to face the impossible, to confront what others feared. As they approached the outskirts of the royal palace, a sense of foreboding washed over Lyra. The palace, once a place of pride, now seemed like a fortress under siege. She could already see the signs of unrest in the streets as she looked out the window of their transport. The people she had sworn to protect were angry, their voices rising in protest against the monarchy. They no longer trusted her leadership, and with each passing day, that trust was eroding faster than she could rebuild it. She had been raised to believe that strength was the key to maintaining control, that power was the only way to command respect. But now, standing beside Alex, she began to question everything she had been taught. Her people wanted change, but could she change herself? Was it even possible to regain the trust of those who had lost faith in her? Alex, sensing her inner turmoil, looked at her with a quiet understanding. Despite his physical limitations, he had never once backed down from a challenge. He had seen hardship, had fought through adversity, and now he was standing by her side, ready to help her face a battle far greater than any he had faced before. "We'll get through this," he said softly, his voice steady and confident. "You don't have to face it alone." Lyra glanced at him, a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty in her eyes. She knew that the rebellion would not be easily stopped, and yet, she couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. With Alex by her side, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to lead her people without losing herself in the process. As they reached the gates of the palace, Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. She had been here countless times before, but tonight was different. Tonight, she wasn't just a princess walking into her kingdom. Tonight, she was a leader who had to prove that she could still command respect, even in the face of overwhelming odds. She knew the rebellion wasn't just a threat to her power, it was a challenge to everything she had ever believed in. "We're here," Alex said, his voice filled with quiet determination. Lyra nodded, taking a deep breath as she stepped out of the transport. The palace loomed ahead, its towering spires casting long shadows across the courtyard. But instead of feeling fear or doubt, Lyra felt something else, something she had never felt before. She felt a sense of resolve, a determination to fight for what she believed in, no matter the cost. As they entered the palace, the guards were already in position, their eyes wary as they noticed the unfamiliar man in a wheelchair accompanying their princess. Lyra could sense the shift in the air as she walked past them. They knew something had changed. They didn't know what it was, but they could feel it. "Your Highness," one of the guards said, bowing respectfully. "The situation is dire. The rebels are gathering just outside the city walls. They demand your abdication. They say the monarchy has no place in this new world." Lyra felt a cold chill run through her, but she didn't flinch. She had heard the same words from her advisors from the whispers in the streets. It was a message that she had been dreading, but now that it was here, she couldn't afford to shy away from it. "I will not step down," she said firmly, her voice carrying through the halls. "We will face this head on." The guard hesitated, for a moment, then nodded. "As you command, Your Highness." Lyra turned to Alex, her heart pounding in her chest. "Do you believe I can still do this? Lead them?" Alex's gaze was unwavering, his eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that sent a wave of reassurance through her. "I don't know what the future holds, Lyra," he said honestly. "But I believe in you. I believe in the strength of your heart. That's the strength that matters." The words hung in the air, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Lyra felt something shift within her. She wasn't just the princess of Xeris. She was someone more than that. She was someone capable of change. She could lead her people without sacrificing her own soul. Suddenly, the ground shook beneath their feet, and a loud crash echoed through the palace. The rebellion had begun. Lyra's heart raced as she turned to face the approaching danger. Her first instinct was to retreat to protect herself, but she knew that wasn't an option. She had to face this rebellion head-on, no matter what the cost. Her people were ready for change, but the question was she ready to give it to them? As the chaos outside intensified, Lyra and Alex prepared for the fight of their lives. It wasn't just a battle for the throne anymore. It was a battle for her future, for her humanity, and for everything she had ever believed in. And in that moment, Lyra knew one thing for certain. She wasn't alone. With Alex by her side, she had found the strength she had been searching for. The true strength that came not from power or control, but from the courage to face the unknown, the courage to fight for what was right. Together, they would stand strong, no matter the odds. The night had descended upon Xeris, but it was not the peaceful quiet Lyra had once known. Instead, the air was thick with tension, fear, and anticipation. The palace that once symbolized her strength now felt like a cage, the walls closing in with each passing moment. The rebellion had arrived, their cries for change echoing through the streets. The city that had always worshipped her as its ruler now sought her downfall. The weight of her crown had never felt heavier, but there was something else, something Lyra could feel in her chest, a force stronger than the rebellion, more powerful than the fear gripping her heart. It was the feeling of hope. A hope that had been ignited the moment Alex had stepped into her life. His unwavering belief in her heart and soul, had made her realize that true leadership didn't come from control or power. It came from love, compassion, and the courage to sacrifice everything for the greater good. "Are you ready?" Alex asked, his voice cutting through the chaos of the palace halls. Lyra turned to him, her heart swelling with emotions. Despite all the fear and uncertainty, despite the raging storm outside, she found strength in him. In his eyes she saw a reflection of her own humanity, a reminder of the woman she was before the weight of the crown had consumed her. He wasn't just a man in a wheelchair. He was her equal, her partner, her rock. "I have to be," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. The palace was under siege. The rebels were at the gates and the battle had already begun. Lyra knew this would not be a simple fight. It wasn't just about her throne anymore. It was about her people's future. It was about whether they could move forward together or tear themselves apart. She had seen enough violence and bloodshed to know that the rebellion wasn't something that could be ignored or wished away. It was a force of change, one that couldn't be stopped by sheer force alone. As the sound of clashing swords grew louder, Lyra turned toward the council chamber. She had a decision to make, one that would determine the fate of her kingdom. She knew what she had to do. The rebellion was fueled by anger and fear, but it wasn't just about overthrowing her. It was about finding a new path, a path that didn't rely on the tyranny of a monarchy. Lyra had been raised to believe in the absolute power of the crown, but Alex had shown her a different kind of strength. Now it was time for her to be the one to make the ultimate sacrifice, the one that would truly change her kingdom. "Alex, I need you to stay here," she said, her voice softer now, filled with a sadness she hadn't expected. Alex looked at her, his eyes wide with concern. "What do you mean I'm not leaving you?" "I have to go out there," Lyra said, her voice firm but filled with emotion. "I have to show my people that I understand their pain, their fears. I have to let them know that I'm not just their ruler. I'm one of them. I can't just fight for control. I need to give them a choice, a real choice." Alex shook his head, trying to reach out to her. "You don't have to do this. There's another way. We can fight together." Lyra stepped back, her eyes filled with the weight of her decision. "No, Alex, this is the only way. My people need to see that I'm willing to sacrifice everything, my title, my power, for them. This is how we heal, how we move forward." Alex didn't speak, but his eyes told her everything. He understood. He knew she had made her decision. And though his heart broke at the thought of losing her, he also knew that this was what it would take to bring true peace. With one last look at Alex, Lyra turned toward the palace doors, her heart racing in her chest. The moment she had feared had arrived. The rebellion, the cries for change, had brought her to this point, and now she had to face them. Not as a princess, not as a ruler, but as a woman who understood the pain of those she had once ruled. As she walked into the courtyard, the rebels stopped, their eyes locked on her, and for a moment there was silence. Lyra stood tall, her heart pounding in her chest. She was no longer the queen in her mind, no longer the symbol of power she had once been. She was just a woman, a person, who had seen the flaws in the system she had once upheld. "I am Lyra," she said, her voice carrying through the crowd, "and I stand before you not as your ruler but as someone who understands your pain. I have spent too long in a world where power is everything, but I see now that power is not in control. It is in unity, in understanding." The rebels looked at her, their expressions unreadable. But as she spoke, Lyra saw something in their eyes, a flicker of recognition, of hope. They weren't fighting to destroy her. They were fighting for something greater, something better, and she had just given them the opportunity to build it. "I am willing to step down," Lyra continued, her voice steady. "I am willing to give up my title, my power, but not because I am weak, because I believe in all of you. I believe in the change that we can create together. I believe in the future we can build, side by side. A murmur rippled through the crowd, and for the first time Lyra felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had made the ultimate sacrifice. She had given up everything she had once held dear. But in return, she had gained something far more valuable, the respect of her people and the knowledge that she had chosen the path of healing, not war. As the crowd began to disperse, the weight that had burdened her for so long lifted. Lyra turned back to Alex, who was waiting for her at the gates. His face was filled with relief, pride, and love. She had done it. She had taken the first step toward a new world, a world where power no longer ruled, but where humanity and unity led the way. And in that moment, Lyra knew that her kingdom would thrive, not because of her sacrifice, but because of the love and strength she had found in herself and in Alex. Together, they had shown that the greatest power of all was the power to change, to evolve, and to choose the path of peace over the path of war. The battle was over. The real work was just beginning.